Hi, everybody, and welcome to Beyond Screens, Playable Theater Edition. I'm Celia Pierce. I'm the co-founder of Indiecade and also professor at Northeastern University, a game designer, a LARP designer, and soon to be a theater designer. And I'm really excited to speak to our guest today, Giancarlo de Jesus. Am I pronouncing your name correctly? Who is the creator of Katipuneros, which is a fantastic LARP about the Filipino Revolution. And I want to say a couple quick things before we start, just so people have context for this, and you can maybe look the game up online. Are you going to show us any images today at all, or Giancarlo, are you going to show us any images?
Yeah, I'll try to show some clips.
Great, fantastic. So Katipuneros sort of appeared out of nowhere at Indiecade. No one knew what it was. And it kind of rocked the house. Everybody was just like, what is this amazing thing? How did this even happen? Who is this person? People were just incredibly impressed by it. And it was around that same time, I think, that you started coming to Playable Theater salons and being part of that community. And I was super excited about like this new find, like the Filipino Playable Theater scene is a thing. And yeah, and you made it into Indiecade. So I wanted to maybe start with you just telling us a little bit about the game for people who aren't familiar with it and what it is. And if you want to show a video, that would be fantastic.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for being here and for the invitation. And I mean, wow. I mean, I'm still actually in disbelief that I'm here. Right. I've been watching Beyond Screen since last year. I've been following these amazing games and LARP makers, and well, what can I say? But yes, I'm very humbled by this opportunity. And of course, good morning from the Philippines, and good evening, and good afternoon to everywhere else in the world. So yeah, I mean, Katipuneros RPG is it's actually like 7 years in the making. Uh, and what's interesting is that I didn't start out initially as an immersive theater piece because first of all, when it was conceptualized back in 2015, I'm not yet aware that immersive theater even exists. And
Mm,
so it is actually it's quite a misnomer in the Philippines to have that kind of theater, but because most of the theater that we Filipinos are just familiar with would be theater of the oppressed, with participatory theater, and shall I say that majority of participatory theaters here does not have much agency. And if I may say also, we consider these as token participations.
mm,
So the journey in creating Katipuneros RPG actually is more of, shall I say, philosophical in the sense that we were looking at a kind of theater. We felt an urge or a need for a more inclusive and a more sustainable kind of theater. So that's how an accessible theater. And when we say accessible, um, we talk about in terms of budget, in terms of production costs, and in terms of how can just a man on the street can simply participate, right? And that also goes with inclusion because from my beginnings as a theater person, we just, of course, we are basically doing traditional theater, wherein you practice, you rehearse a piece for 3 to 4 months, and just show them because we don't have a theater industry. Community theaters are really small, so you would just present them for just a maximum of 1 week. So imagine that we cannot really recoup our production costs. So it's really
mm.
not sustainable. And in so doing, we thought of how can we make theater more sustainable, more accessible, more inclusive, and that's when we began discussing a philosophy or a system that began with a question: why is theater called play anyway? right? Like why is it a theater play? Why, I mean,
Mm.
why call it a play? And I did some research, and Peter Brook, of course, the eminent director of the Royal Shakespeare Academy, he mentioned in the book Empty Space that it's not accidental that these terms are you know can be interchanged. So I was intrigued, and from that point forward, I did some action research wherein I treated all of my plays or everything in the repertoire as basically playing. And we discovered that the closest game, if I may say, or play to theater as we know it is what we call pretend play, or the children's imaginative play.
Mm.
As it has costumes, props, and everything, and it's relatively cheap because you just use your imagination, and also it also has one distinct feature, which is it's very participatory, wherein it is inherently participatory in such a way that the tendency is if they are spectators, then you destroy the magic circle, so to speak. And with this in mind, we realized that okay, if we play history, then we're probably creating time machines. So the first piece that came before Katipuneros RPG is actually a World War II piece, a site-specific piece that I did, and it is on a actual Japanese war tunnel because we were occupied by the Japanese for 3 years during the war, and so that is actually how we approach the relationship between actors and participants, and that's how the theory was born. And then from that point forward, we started calling that as just playing or pretend play. And with Katipuneros RPG, we decided the what if, the magic if. What if we have all in this case our target audiences were students, because Katipunan, or the Revolution of 1896, is a much talked about topic in Philippine courses or history subjects. And I'm not so sure, but here in the Philippines, they consider history as a very boring, tedious subject. And so I said, and, well, that hurts me a lot because I'm a history buff. So in my case, why don't I create something that would make history interesting? So because you can read about how to join the revolution, you can watch a film. There have been several films and plays about the revolution. But what if I make you experience the revolution? And in that case, let's begin with the initiation process, how to become a member of that movement. So in this case, it's like joining a club or a fraternity type of thing. So why don't we make them join, and why don't we create this time traveling or time capsules in
Mhm.
abandoned houses and all of this, and in whatever materials that we can use. And finally, in February of 2019, Players RPG was born. It's in its actually it's also inspired with art in such a way that people were kind of surprised when they realized that the Katipuneros that we submitted for Indicate is actually episode 11, because we
Oh.
we are planning. Uh, it's still in the works right now. We're planning for episodes 1 to 10 to appear as transmedia. So it's like ARG, and you're practically playing episode 11. It's called Eve of the Revolution, because the main goal of this game is you should have already entered or become a Katipunero before the revolution even starts.
Mm.
Because yeah, if not, then you're kind of siding with the enemy. So you really have to be able to finish the quest in in the live version, or I mean, in the face-to-face physical version, you have 3 hours to do that. To finish all the quests and become a certified Katipunero, because in the olden days, there's an initiation process that is quite sacred, that we use the actual documents in order for you to be able to become a Katipunero. You need to demonstrate not just skill but also values and morals. So it's there are a lot of tests attributed to that, and that's where the Larping comes in. You need to play a role, and you need to talk to Katipuneros who are in the place without being caught by called the Guardia Civil or the sentries that will of course delay or even prevent you from becoming or moving forward as a Katipunero. So yeah, that's basically the genesis, if I may say, of Katipuneros RPG.
Do you have a clip? You said you had a short clip you wanted to show us.
Yeah. Let me show you this one. So share my screen, and yeah, you should see the screen, right?
Is the audio coming through? I think maybe you can just talk over it, because the audio's okay. Yeah. Just go ahead and talk over it.
I have to toggle the sound. Yeah, my bad.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Ang Katipunan! Wag niyong ibibigay kahit kanino ang inyong sedula. Sa Guardia Civil! Maraming salamat sa inyong pagkakas.
Parang dito, parang tinry in-live yung past na kung paano ba yung proseso ng pagiging Katipunero, tapos kung paano nga ba sila nakikibaka. Yung flow ng life before. Pag-experiential kasi yung way of learning ng isang tao ay na nagkakaroon siya ng hands-on experience. Nagagamit niya yung mga senses niya, and mas nakakapag-isip siya, na mas nakifeel niya yung situation rather than baka hindi nakaupo ka lang sa classroom. Kapag sinabi kasi sa'yo na nahuhuli noon, tapos nagdadakip, tapos nakakatakot, paano mo masasabi kung paano yung level ng nakakatakot kung ikaw mismo hindi mo na-experience?
Natanong kita, Binibini, ano yung inabot mo? Salamat kong piraso ng papel, ito. Pwede ko bang makita? Pwede ko bang makita? Hindi yan yun. Ano to? Sumama sa Katipunan.
Makikita, yung mafe-feel, anong nangyari po talaga dati. Parang marirealize natin na lahat at nung parang hirap na ginawa din tayo pagtakas is to be one of them.
Right, thanks. That's that's a video from 2019. Yeah, before of course the pandemic was
Yeah.
closed. As an additional information, it was presented in London and in Hong Kong because it has been empirically researched by the university or here, and they found out that yes, it did enhance, the interest in history and in history learning, because again, it's experiential learning, embodied learning even. And yeah, we're able to publish an article about its in an international journal that is about its effectivity. I mean, in terms of involving not just the cognitive but the affective and even psychomotor aspects of learning. And Katipuneros, I hope, because it seems to us that in the Philippines and hopefully everywhere in the world that the pandemic is already, you know, fizzling down, if I may say. So I hope that we can go back in, again, going beyond screen, because what we do with the players right now is it's in Zoom. But yeah, we're hoping that we can go back on tour, because before the pandemic happened, every school, even companies, as team building activities, they entertain Katipuneros RPG even in their own locations.
Yeah, I mean, I think I saw this. This video was the first time I saw it. When I saw it, I think when you were, maybe before you were in Indicate, I saw it. Maybe you sent it to me, but it just delights me when I watch it, because I can see how engaged people are. And I'm also a history buff, and I'm really into creating immersive historical experiences as well as ARGs. And so I agree with you. I feel like it's a really exciting way to engage with history, and obviously your players also felt that way. And part of what's interesting about it is I think it's the embodiment. Like when the girl was talking about, like, but we don't really know how scary it is until we've experienced it ourselves. That you can't do that in a digital game. That feeling of like being arrested and taken away can't really be replicated even in VR, because you have to have a physical body to have that feeling, right? So I found it so compelling and exciting. And this moment I saw it, I was like, I really want to play this. And it's great to hear a little bit about kind of some of the thinking and the philosophy behind it as well. The idea of play and engaging in play, and also moving away from the sort of proscenium oriented theater. I've also been frustrated with the kind of promenade theater, immersive theater style of work where the audience really has no agency. So yes, there's no fourth wall physically, but there is a fourth wall. It's just three-dimensional. So in your piece, there is no fourth wall anywhere. Like, people are right there in the moment of that revolution experience, right? And proving themselves to be part of this secret society, which, ultimately changed the whole trajectory of your country's history. It's really compelling. I'd love to find out a little bit more about your background. You talked about doing some prior work like this, and I mean, you have more of a traditional theater background. Is that the case?
Yeah, I would say a traditional community theater background. And when we say community, we really mean it in the sense of a rural community. And we're also talking about, shall we say, a less affluent communities, where we're dealing with. That's why I began with working with political theater. And because here in the Philippines, because we are, a developing country, right? There are a lot of sectors that needs help. And I spent more than 20 years as a volunteer, going to places wherein theaters not really the theater is really considered a luxury. Like even for schools here, there are you wouldn't believe that there are schools that wouldn't really have the basic necessary um, facilities, like not just a room. Um, that's why majority of my theater style was born out of basketball courts. We have gymnasiums. We don't
Mm.
have proper venues. We don't have proper support because again, theater is really considered as a luxury. Um, we don't. Majority of theaters here would have community theaters here would have a budget of less than $500. You know, like for a full production, that's unimaginable. And that's why we needed to develop an aesthetic that would suit the conditions that we have, and but yet provide the level of learning, the level of engagement, and the level of entertainment. And so far I believe that Katipuneros was able to do that because again, regarding background, I'm not a theater student myself. I mean, I'm just fortunate. And that's why I volunteered until now. I'm still volunteering because I consider that as as a way to show my gratitude, to the people who helped me before, and gave me theater, and showed me a direction that I have been following for the last 25 years. So I owe it to them. That's why I am continuously improving and making theater very useful. As a matter of fact, I have an education degree as well as a media degree, and the master's that I took is in creative industries. That's why right now, in terms of profession, I teach at the State University, teaching entrepreneurship. And basically,
Mm.
that's basically what I have been telling people, like you can be an entrepreneur in a lot of things, like especially creative entrepreneurship. Like, what is creative industries? I always tell them that it's like having an arts degree while having an MBA. And if people still cannot get the hang of it, I would tell them it's K-pop, it's Korean drama. It's how
Mhm.
it's how the Korean economy got really huge. It's the soft power that Korea has right now. So that's creative industries. And the reason I took the creative industries is, number one, it led me into, again, innovating theater. And that's why I was very happy to have found um, immersive theater along the way, because it's part of the set of tools that I utilize in order to be able to arrive at such a theater a theater method that is suitable to our conditions. And since I believe that theater, or not theater but play, is a universal language, then it becomes more inclusive. It breaks the barriers. Unlike theater before, wherein it's considered quite elitist. And
Mm.
not only that, you got to spend a lot of time and effort in putting up a production. But unlike with the theater innovations that I was able to do here, we were able to cut down a lot of stuff that we don't really consider these things as not necessary, but again, luxury. Like, we don't have the luxury of time, we don't have the luxury of money. And that's why being able to cut down rehearsal time is it's really wise, to do it here. We are applying as much as possible creativity when it comes to properties and sets. And if there's something that I've discovered with play, or if you're inside the magic circle, is that often set design, props, and costumes are not I'm not saying it's not important. What I'm trying to say is it's not going to be that critical anymore, because as you can see in the video, the Guardia Civil should, or the sentries should look like soldiers. but they don't. In my in my productions, they, because we are really low budget, it was self-produced actually at that time. We don't have budget at that time to have the actual costumes or to make them tailor fit to shall
Right,
we
because
say.
if it was, what do they call it, a 360 LARP or a high fidelity LARP, everyone would be in 1890s costumes, including the players, right?
Yes, and that's why, because of this book right here, I mean, you have this book, right, as well. I mean, the pink one, right?
Oh yeah,
This-
the Johanna's book.
yeah, the Johannes
Johanna's
book. Yeah,
Johanna's book
it
about LARP
introduced me to the
design.
idea of black box LARPing or,
Mm.
or chamber LARPing, and I said that, hey, that's what I'm doing right now. It's like
Can
black
you pull the
box.
book out and show it to our viewers? I love it that you have a pile of books. Mine are on the other side of my camera, but that is one of the books in my pile.
Yeah, here.
Yeah, this is a fantastic book that's kind of the Bible for people doing live action role playing from some of the leading
Right.
Nordic LARP designers, right?
Yeah.
It's great.
We still don't have copies of this book here in the Philippines. I got this from London, and yeah, during when I took my masters. And by the way, before I forget, let me mention in terms of background that
I was going to ask you your training or education would be good to hear about a little bit.
yeah, I mean, apart from that, yeah, I mean, apart from yeah, my education background, I basically do theater on the side before, like I sometimes sacrifice classes when I was in college just to do theater and travel.
What were you studying in college and undergrad?
Oh, it's basically mass communications.
Oh, okay.
We just call it development communication here in the Philippines. It's an original discipline that it's shall we say an early innovation of mass communication that is purposively the intention is for development. I mean, the context is again developing countries.
Oh, interesting. So it's very, I mean, I find it fascinating as you're talking about the specific context of your development, because that is a very interesting background, and it directly connects to this project, right? Because it is really about the origins of the Philippines as its own nation. So
Right.
I find that really interesting. The other thing that really struck me was when you were talking about the space, and the idea of no proscenium. In your world, there is no proscenium in the first place. Right?
Yes.
So I was like, wow, they just had literally no proscenium at all. And so it's a totally different kind of experience to have that. I was thinking about Schechner's environmental theater when you were talking about that, about site specific, because that's something else I'm really interested in, site specific experiences, but yours is very much also about the larger socioeconomic conditions that you're working in, which fascinates me. And then when you said mass communication, I'm like, oh, that makes perfect sense, because you're part of what you're doing that I also find super exciting is making something that is arguably not only inaccessible, but not that interesting to a lot of people. I mean, here, one of the things that struck me about your video that got me excited about it was the age of the participants, because in America, like over the pandemic, I went to a lot of online theater, and what I discovered was that the average theater goer is over 60. They're probably retired, in fact. And the times I would see younger people involved would be on shows that were on Twitch, because the Twitch audience is a younger audience. So watching this experience that you designed and watching a bunch of teenagers get super excited about it was really one of the things that struck me, like, oh, these are kids who are really into this. So, and then you said you got a master's degree. Was that, can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh yeah. In 2018, I got a scholarship from the University of the Arts London (UAL) in the Central St. Martin campus, and
that's my, that's my alma mater as well. That's where I got my PhD.
Yeah, I've read about your profile, and I was like, remember the first time I communicated with you on Discord? It's like I was, wow. We
Yeah.
went to the same school,
That's
and probably
awesome.
I'll be your student. Who knows, right?
I love
And
it.
yeah, so I took this very interesting course. Well, before I should have considered taking up theater arts, definitely, but there's this very interesting course. Again, I believe that if I take this course, it will not just be beneficial for my own career or to the current direction that I would like to take in theater, because I suppose that if I take the theater course or the theater graduate studies there in the London Drama Society, right? It will be the traditional route of theater. So, I mean, that's not going to be very experimental. So I took this course called the Masters of Applied Imagination in the Creative Industries.
Nice.
Nice, right? And in a nutshell, what applied imagination is talking about is that it's like you take your creative work or your creative discipline, and we need to deconstruct, reconstruct, and combine it
Mm.
with other disciplines in order for us to come up with a new one. So it's like applying your imagination. So it's active innovation. And what can it do to serve society, or can it have a new kind of audiences? Can it develop a new market? These are the
Well,
things.
also, in your case, what do we mean by society? I mean, the
Yeah.
British, theater in Britain is a thing, but it's a very British thing, and it's very, you're in a post-colonial nation that wants to create its own vocabulary and its own expression, right?
And
So you can't just sort of swallow the pill of British theater. You know what I mean? It's like you have to
bingo.
reinvent it, or come up with, or invent it from scratch, really.
Yeah, we need to really just like what I've said. I mean, by now you should have, of course, the impression that I am innovating theater to suit the conditions that we have here, to serve basically the underserved communities. What I did is a project called, and coincidentally, playable tourism, or we call it playful tourism,
Oh, wow, yeah.
because I remember arguing, with my tutors, of course, arguing in class. It's like more of a discourse that I've been telling them that the Philippines, in the tropics, it's not just rich in ecosystem, because the Philippines is considered as a mega diversity. And I said that it's a mega diversity, it's an archipelago. It's also a mega diversity in culture. And I said, with culture comes a lot of stories. So in the context of creative industries, a lot of content. Unfortunately, because of the post-colonial experience, well, these again, using your own words earlier, you said they don't find these things interesting because everything that is local is uninteresting for a colonial mindset. And I said, when it comes to the problem statement, that what's keeping us, or what's holding a post-colonial country back is its cultural poverty, if I may say. Because according to UNESCO, there was, I read somewhere in the 1983 convention, that economic and cultural development goes hand in hand. And because we are still basically reconstructing our culture, finding our identity, then I realized that it's very important that we make use of our stories, like what Korea is doing right now. Like Netflix is sponsoring everything that is Korean content, like their stories. Then, and I told myself before going to UIL that, why then, Philippines, maybe we can be, in that kind of situation wherein we can make use of our content. And I've studied during the course of my studies. I read all about the Hallyu, or they call the Korean wave, the
Mm,
phases. They are currently in their 3.0 right now. 1.0
mm,
began with food and film. And so
mm.
I told myself, okay, we don't have that kind of resources. I mean, films. So why can't we do something else to make use of our content? And let's make use of theater, and not just theater, again, the conventional theater, because as I also stated in my discourse with my British professors, I said we don't have a theater industry. You know, like
You don't
unlike
even have a theater building. I mean, that's
yeah,
what
we
kills
have
me. It's like,
some.
yeah, but I mean, my point is like, yeah, beyond, I mean, having an industry, but like even having a space. I mean, this is an
Yeah,
ongoing problem, even with participatory theater, is you need a physical space to do it in.
that's right. And most of these theaters are just concentrated, run by casinos as entertainment. You know, in the capital. So it's like the Macau. You know, in the context of Macau and Singapore. Um, so again, in terms of its geography, it's non-accessible to the locals. It's just for tourists. And I said, okay, why? Since in the U.S. in of course we have Broadway and then the West End in the UK, people
Mhm.
go to your theaters or they take a tour to go to your theaters. Now, for playable tourism, as my thesis, I said, why don't you visit the Philippines and do theater the moment that you land in the country? So
Mhm.
play a role. So I said that why can't we create the Philippines as your choose your own adventure, you know, kind of packages wherein Katipuneros RPG, you can experience Katipuneros RPG in one location, and then the next episode will be in another location, and so it's like it reminds me of Caro Murphy's pub crawl. You know, something
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
you're gonna do some sort of a pub crawl, you know, in all of our islands because you are going to experience history because history is alive because of
Mm,
LARP, because of playable theater. And
mm,
so far, what I'm doing currently is I'm talking to some famous families, you know, those who want to protect their legacies, if I may say, the family, the heirs, and the descendants of heroes. And I've been telling them, hey, let's LARP the biographies.
mm,
Let's have one LARP or one playable theater in each community, and this will become a community enterprise, and everybody can participate. Everybody can run their enterprises basically, provided that we have this aesthetic that I've been developing. So that's the shall I say the inspiration also, or where do I want to take this later on? So I've been
what-
working with. I mean, allow me to say very briefly that that's been a very long journey because what's so sad in the theater scene or community theater scene now in the Philippines is that not only that the scarcity is in terms of the space and time, but interests as in interest as well. I mean, yeah, yes, I mean, you might have seen in the video that there are a lot of young people involved. But before Katipuneros RPG, they don't want to participate in theater anymore. They don't want to do the rehearsals because it takes too much time. And majority of entertainment can now be found in social media or again on screens. So um, what gave me motivation is I was able to watch RJ Barrett's video somewhere in YouTube, and I think the inspiration behind Sleep No More is he said at that time the context is that how do you make theater as addictive as Candy Crush? So Candy Crush was a thing
yeah,
before. So I told myself, yeah, like yeah. So we can really learn a lot from play and games, and if these are presented as games, then playable theater would now be considered as a form of entertainment and education for the children. So this is the current the direction that we are taking right now.
yeah. When you were talking about the pub crawls, one I did a couple of the pub crawls that Carol ran in the city of Malden last summer, and one of them was it was one they had already designed, but they kind of repurposed it as a historical experience, and it was a murder mystery about a real thing that happened in the city. But what was interesting about it was that there was this, you're walking through the space and you're going to these, physical locations or historical locations that are related to like one of the places we went was the actual place where the murder occurred. So having that, so that sort of speaks to your thing about, history is alive, like it's there, it's all around us all the time. and all we need to do is really, engage with it or pull it out in some way. And that was an interesting example of creating that live interaction. And in that case, going back to thinking about immersive, like all of the players were in full costume. Like we came totally dolled up in 1840s attire, like we were ready to go. So, and the other thing I was going to mention too was, your discussion about who the audience for theater is really, I think, important, because I think that's changing, and I think playable theater is really for a different audience than proscenium theater. It's really a different group of people who don't want to sit still, in their experience. They want to engage. And part of what's cool about it is you don't always have the same experience. Even if the story's the same, if you go in as a character participating, you can drive or influence what happens. I had one of my first LARP experiences was I was in a vampire LARP at Dragon Con when I lived in Atlanta, and it was very large. There was probably a couple hundred people in it, and I'd never done a vampire LARP before. I didn't know anything. I was, kind of a noob. And in the course of the game, this whole series of dramatic interactions happened. And afterwards, I was talking to my friend who had taken me to it, and I was telling her, how I thought it was so great the way the GMs had set up this whole narrative of this conflict. And she said, "Oh, the GMs didn't do that. The players took it over. They rebelled against the GMs, and they changed the story that the GM was trying to tell because they didn't like it." And when I heard that, this was already after I had been studying emergent behavior in online games, and I was like, oh, that's the cool thing about these live experiences, that the players can literally just stage a revolution within the experience and totally derail what the designer wants, which to me as a designer was the most exciting thing. I was like, oh, cool, like they'll take it over and make it into something new. Was there anything that happened when you ran this game that you were surprised by, that you didn't expect, that players did, and you went, whoa, I wasn't planning for that?
Yeah, there were a couple, and again, you're right. No two experiences are the same, so that's what's also very advantageous with playable theater, and that has a lot of impact when it comes to revenue, right? And when it comes to revenue, there was this person who played this around 4 times. It's only the 4th time that he became a Katipunero. Yeah, because
so he didn't even succeed the first 3 times. Wow.
Yeah. And as the story goes, my wife, who was running the show at that time, because so what's interesting about this is that I haven't told you yet that I haven't experienced Katipuneros yet. How come? Because I was in London when it was premiered, and I haven't experienced.
So you weren't physically there when it happened?
No, I was basically online, and I helped somebody wear a camera, and then I've been telling the person or the character or the NPC, get me somewhere, get me here, get me there. So and so he, as the story goes.
Wait. So you were there mediated by a camera that somebody else was walking around. So they were basically your avatar. Is that a fair way to describe that?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, but I'm more of
that's
an
its own cool experience.
It was. I was only able to experience Katipuneros when it was brought to the UK, but it's a very small black box. Again, black box LARP style. And again, the story goes, my wife saw this guy, because when you finish Katipuneros, it will end with the party. So it's very festive and jubilant. And he saw this one guy walking with his head bowed and so sad, exiting the venue. And she was talking to me at that time in my avatar self. And then I told her to talk to him. And then he talked to the young guy, and then the young guy said, I've been spending a lot on this game already, and I'm not succeeding. And I said, okay, give him free tickets tomorrow. Ask him to come back. And lo and behold, he became a Katipunero in record time, in like less than an hour. So yeah, because there's the mastery. And in terms of people going off script, let's just use the term going off script. There were there were a lot. Like, of course, people invading or running away from the Guardia Civil or the sentries.
Mm.
Uh, I mean, if they catch you, you're supposed to just go to the prison. But there's some who really fight for their lives and run and escape and
Mm.
hide. And that's just a minor diversion. The major diversions were there are actually some in-game purchases like power-ups. There's this particular power-up which is quite expensive that that will make the Guardia Civil exit the premises. So you can do all the quests without any hindrances. And it's quite expensive, definitely, because we don't want people to always buy these amulets. But in one show, there was a group of students who bought 5 of these amulets in succession, basically eliminating the sentries in that game entirely. So
Mm.
uh, that's one thing. Another was students become players, they begin attacking the Guardia Civil at once and trying to
Oh.
eliminate them
Oh.
in the game as early as they can. So I think that's smart. They and then
Yeah.
some of them also tried to get inside the house, because what happens is that you need to finish at least 20 quests as a group before you get inside the house where the actual initiation process is happening. Uh, there are people who'd like to create shortcuts in order for them to get inside the initiation
Mm-hmm.
processes quickly as they can. So um, I think for me it's very lovely. I know of some makers or creators that get frustrated by these actions, but not me, because I would like to have as much as possible the idea of co-creation. That's going to happen in my place. So as much as possible, I am designing for co-creation, and that actually saves me a lot of effort in designing according to a specific persona. Like what would they like? What would be just like what you said in the Vampire LARP, wherein they try to change the story or the narrative because they didn't like it. So yeah, I mean, this is a very good way of really catering to their desires. So we keep as much as possible half of the narrative open. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
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 I mean, I have a term for that I talk to my students about a lot, and I've written a little bit about is I describe it as the player shaped hole. So like when you create an interactive experience, you're carving out a space for the player, and you get to decide how big or small you want that space to be. But that co-creation aspect is something I've been, as you know, quite preoccupied with for a long time about, yeah, how, at what point, because what you find is that you need a little structure. Like
yeah.
I took a couple of years ago, I took an improv class at Boston Improv here in Boston, and I I had a really hard time with it because they would tell me that you get up on stage and just make something up from nothing. And I told my teacher, I said, look, if you give me a card with 3 lines of text on it, I can create a character, but I can't come up with anything from nothing. Like I can't just get up and suddenly be a character. But if you told me, oh,
Yeah.
it's a nurse and she's, trying to assassinate somebody, like all you have to do is give me three or 4 data points and I can build a story around it, but I can't build from nothing. So as a game designer, I feel like that's part of the tension there is like, how to put enough to give some scaffolding, but leave enough space for the players. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
that's where the magic happens.
yeah, I mean, I've
Right?
seen your video at the Immersive Design Summit. I think this was back in 2019, right? And yeah, well, what you just mentioned about scaffolding is very interesting. You did mention that if you're gonna put things that are familiar, like a banquet, like a party or a wedding, this would
Yeah,
really help your help the players become more immersed. It helps them, imagine and wrap themselves in or weave themselves into the story. And so that's exactly what I did with Katipuneros. Aside from Katipuneros being, um, to everybody's knowledge, they know what Katipunan is, at least in the Philippines. What actually helped my audiences from the UK and even from the US is that it's a party. There's a fiesta. If they're familiar with the Mexican style fiesta, then they
hmm,
immediately get what's going on. That there will be a lot of games. There will be drinking and eating and performances on stage,
dancing.
dancing. Yeah, yeah, you saw in the video. Yeah, that also helped me a lot. We don't really need to hire performers, because that's part of the quest. That's part of the challenge. You need to go up on stage, perform traditional dances. It doesn't have to be right or correct. You just have to perform. So that's
So
they're
yeah,
basically, yeah, they're basically,
I think that's one of the things that makes the project so exciting, is that the play is fun to watch. Like, I've never played it, but I just enjoy the video because it's already the player activity is performative. I mean, that to me is the best LARPs, are the ones where, because in a LARP, there's no audience, right? Um, and in a playable theater, there's also actors, but there's no audience, and so what people are doing is also the show, right? And so, to me, part of what makes a really good LARP is that even if you don't really play the LARP, it's still fun to watch. Like, that's what Kelly and Pletcher Adams' work that she's talked about before, and she's been talked to you about at the salons, of the Drosselmeyer series that she's been doing, is like that. Like, you can go and sit and do nothing the whole time and still have a great time, because the other players are putting on a show for you, right? As well as the actors. But that's part of, yeah, a lot of the really great black box LARP designers, like Nina and Essendrop is a great example of this, where her pieces are just beautiful to watch, even though there's no audience watching, but as you're in them, you feel like this is a beautiful aesthetic experience, right? So it's very cool. The social scaffolding, that was one of the things I talked about in that Immersive Summit talk. What I find really interesting about history games is that they sort of have that built in, because people can reference that historical moment. And even in the case of Katipuneros, most people have a sense of what a revolution is, right? So they know, oh, we're going to be participating in a revolution as well, which is inherently exciting. Like, who doesn't want to be part of a revolution, right? For better or worse. So yeah, having those things, those kind of familiar things, and the other thing I talk about a little bit is indexicality, and that you can rely on people's shared knowledge. So I've been doing some writing recently about weddings, and that wedding is a really good thing to build a LARP or a playable theater experience around, because even irrespective of your culture, right? Every culture has some kind of wedding ceremony. And so, like, one of my favorite ones that I've written about is the Palestinian. Do you know this one? The wedding that takes place in Palestine with a Norwegian spouse. So it was a multicultural project created by Palestinian and Scandinavian LARP designers. And the idea of it was a wedding between a Norwegian man and a Palestinian woman. And the players were half and half, right? And they all came together, and it was like they went to Palestine and had this Palestinian wedding LARP experience, but like, because it was a wedding, everyone knew what the basic purpose of it is. Like you were saying with a fiesta, like, oh, it's, you know, we know that we're here for this purpose. And so that gives you a lot. I think one of the reasons I like that model is because it removes some of the overhead that, you know, you were talking about accessibility. Like, I think a lot of people are afraid of LARP because there's too much homework. Right? I mean, I've played LARPs where I literally got a 30-page book where not only did I have to memorize my character's backstory, I also had to memorize everyone else's backstory. And at that point, it becomes more work and less play, right?
Yeah.
So having that kind of familiar structure that people can just jump into, even teenagers, I think really gives you, you know, it allows you to set to, it's more accessible. It allows people to get directly to the fun part, right?
Yeah, yeah. In my case, I am completely yeah, because I've read the Bible. I mean, yeah, this big book. Again, you mentioned that there's no audiences, but yeah, in the book says that there are first person audiences, and
Yeah.
and I agree that when I read the book, because I have really not much experience on LARPing myself, because there aren't much, if there's really any active LARP groups here in the Philippines. So in my case, again, my takeoff is just play in games. So for me, if I agree with you that if you know, we'll have more time for rehearsals and workshops, because according to the book, there are even some LARPs who would run for like 3 hours, but there will be like 3 days of rehearsal
Yeah.
workshop.
Yeah,
And
the
for me,
workshopping is,
yeah, it defeats the purpose in my case, right? Because I've been just telling you earlier that that's something that we are trying to avoid. We want to just, you know, get inside the action as quick as possible, and that is, and that I owe much to game design, wherein there's going to be some activation part, and activation is very important. Um Apart from a very creative way of dealing with orientation, or how do you orient your um, your audiences. And
yeah, your phone.
in this case, can you hear that?
Yes.
Yeah,
It's
can you hear
okay.
the second
It
here?
happens.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
live. You never know. You never
yeah.
know what's going
So
to happen.
what happens is that what we do is like for us, activation is very important. Wherein
What do you
we
mean
should
when you say activation? What do you mean by that?
we should give them time to get at ease with their characters. We should give them opportunity to have some small wins as much as possible. Like costuming is, instead of coming in with a costume, like we can provide costumes for a small fee, and costuming in itself is an activation. You know, they're you know, getting into the role,
Right. Yep. Yep.
and giving them opportunities to, like, okay, now you also in the form of an orientation, like okay, now you have your our tickets, we call them as cedula. In Spanish it's the identity certificate. So the identity certificate allows you to um, go to the buffet,
Oh, oh.
so there's food, and apart from that, the identity certificate is used, they're always checked. Go to the buffet,
Oh, oh.
so there's food, and apart from that, the identity certificate is used, they're always checked by the sentries, so you need to have them you know, present all the time. So what happens in the place that in terms of activation, there will be a sentry at the very beginning that would check for your identity certificates. And
And that's the
so,
ticket, right? That
yeah,
becomes the ticket. It's
yeah.
brilliant.
So slowly they are getting into the role. They're being the audience are being trained, you know, to become transitional players. Now you're in costume. Now that you're eating turn of the century food, now you have your names, your old names, so that's when they start becoming more involved in the game. The immersion starts. It begins, and that's how they basically get into the role and into the hang of it. And that's why they start feeling anxious when the sentries are around, even though the sentries pretty much look like people in shirts, like office shirts, something like that, or they would look like more of like waiters.
But you can see from the video that they're performing, like even though they're not in costume, their stance is very authoritative.
Yes.
They really are
yes.
It's really clear from watching that.
I was about to say that it eliminates it attests to the power of immersion, wherein even though it's like from a first person audience, if you're playing pretend play, your imagination, you're already adding details into the absence. And that's what I love about theater. They say it's also theater in the mind kind of thing, wherein again there's just a very small structure, and you begin adding details, and it adds to what Jane McGonigal says, the active creation of belief rather than the suspension of disbelief.
Yeah, when you were talking about that, I was thinking about improv actors and how they'll do a lot of exercise with objects that aren't there. And in your mind you can see the object because of the way the actor is interacting with it, which I'm learning more because for me, I'm sort of new to theater. I'm a pretty seasoned LARPer at this point, but I'm pretty new to theater. So there's a certain set of crafts I think that are really useful. One of the things I wanted to go back to was you talked about games and video games in particular, and I think that's really astute because this is something video games have learned how to do but didn't always do well. And I always talk to my kids about this. Half-Life was the first game I remember where the tutorial was actually part of the game. And the opening sequence of Half-Life is you're in this lab, and then like you're just thrust into a situation, and you're like told to go to your locker and get your lab coat or whatever, and go do this and go do that. And you learn all the game mechanics through actually being in the story, which is kind of what you're describing. And I love the idea of using the ticket. I mean, this was something that they did in one of the first immersive pieces, which was Tony and Tina's wedding back in the 80s, was when you buy a ticket, instead of getting a ticket, you'd get a wedding invitation in the mail.
Yeah.
So this is what we call in video game design a diegetic element, because it's inside the fictional world of the game. So in your case, the ticket is actually this ID card. So the minute you engage, the moment you've purchased that experience, it's already giving you something from inside the world. And I think that that's also something that's really strong for immersion. And just a little bit of that, like what you were saying, is just that one little thing. You can't afford a lot of artifacts, but that one little thing is a hook that gets people into the experience. It's really good.
And this is the reason we initially wanted for an ARG part to be present. Like what I said, the playable theater part is already episode 11. So we plan to provide the narrative from episodes 1 to 10 using transmedia and pervasive theater, wherein diegetic materials, we planned for diegetic materials to become marketing materials as well, wherein we intended before to post old advertisements like, hey, buy this sewing machine, and the sewing machine is for just this much. And so it will like get the attention of people, like, why is this, what is this? And one of the most ambitious thing that we haven't done yet is we would like to, as part of the story, we would like to put in to install some dummies that are hanging by treetops,
Mm.
and they would have some, tags like, this person is killed because he's a Katipunero. It's diegetic because during this time, the context is, that there are some killings already happening, around that fictional society, because at this time, at this point in history, uh, the colonial government is already, they're already fearful of the existence of this revolutionary movement. So that's why, they
Mm.
started killing of people who they suspect to be part of the movement. And
Yeah.
as a diegetic form of marketing, we'd like to put in some dummies, and that would be Instagrammable, or what they call the Instagrammable moment,
Yeah. Yeah.
that would become part of the marketing. So it becomes pervasive, that it will exist in, outside of the performance space.
Hmm. Well, this is also the sort of what I've written about the blurry magic circle. Like there is that, when you're in that theatrical experience, there is a distinct boundary, but then you can also bleed the story out into other ways. So it's, yeah, mixed in with people's daily lives, which I think is also interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think we're about out of time. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about vis-a-vis the project, or anything else you're working on, for that matter?
Oh, well, I've just began doing, this time, about a legend of about what we call a mountain deity, in a
Mm-hmm.
place where I actually live. I actually live at the foothills of a mountain. They consider this as a mystical mountain, and the deity's name is Maria Makiling.
Mm-hmm.
So, but of course, I suspect the Maria, of course, comes from the colonial past. So she should be aptly named as Makiling, just Makiling. And so this is going to be an immersive audio slash experience as well, that is quite physical, that's combined with a nature hike up in the mountain. And it is, I consider it as eco-cultural tourism, kind of thing. And
Mm.
apart from, and this is designed, of course, to communicate the conservation of forests. And I just finished a LARP script on a local history of a former professor in our college that lived through the war, and he left a narrative that happens to um, to retell events that happened inside the university where I'm teaching currently, and he connoted a lot of events that happened in buildings that still exist as of the moment.
Oh,
So
wow, that's amazing.
yeah, so again, going back to the pub crawl concept, I think I'm gonna do it, in that way. But I also prepared the live script to be playable in a black box LARP style. But
Mm-hmm.
but of course, the descendants of the family, they're leaning towards doing the pub crawl, because it's never been done here in the Philippines. Going from one historical building in the college to
Yeah,
another,
it's great.
and
It's so
yeah, and then
cool.
yes, and then LARPing for a few minutes there, before moving to another. So
These both
I'm looking
also
forward
are
to it.
very much in line with your idea of the tourism. What did you call it?
Yeah,
Playable tourism, right? Is that
yeah,
exploring a space in an alternative role with a different relationship to the space, which is also really, really cool. I really like that a lot.
yeah.
I'm
And
excited. Well, I hope, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, just uh, I'm also exploring in terms of research, and I would like to consider this as more of, again, a work that tries to bridge accessibility and sustainability and inclusivity of theater. Is I'm trying to create what I call, so far I'm tentatively calling it theater on demand, wherein we're Like if
your communication and branding and all of that coming back, right?
yeah, coming
That's
back.
very hip sounding, I just have to say.
Thank you. Because I've been exploring the idea of like Netflix was really disruptive, in the past few years, So I mean, I'm exploring the implications of theater on demand right now. Like if we're gonna have yet another pandemic, if this will continue and then people will still be on lockdown, then how can they do theater or LARP on demand? So maybe we can also call that LARP on demand. That maybe currently in exploring the use of technology, but not relying on technology. Just using that as more of a new media that would, it's like a new media installation that would kind of help people do LARP, even if the GM would be an avatar, or maybe there will not be a GM after all. So these are the things that
Yeah, there's been a little bit that, but the LARP community, at least like particularly the Nordic LARP community, is very antagonistic to this, because like when we organized the online LARP Fest in Second Life, they were like, they didn't want us to, we submitted it to several LARP festivals and it got rejected from all of them. We got asked to be put on a panel. We were accepted into a online theater festival, but the LARP people, I guess the live action thing is just, but as you were talking, I was also thinking about, I like the idea of, when you said theater on demand, I pictured people showing up at your house. You know what I mean? In live, coming into your home and doing something, which also is kind of interesting. The Capital W, do you know those guys in LA? They've been in Indicate a couple of times.
Oh yeah, I mean,
So
I am
good.
impressed with the idea of one-to-one theater, like the Red Flags, and
Yeah.
this is of course needless to say that of course the Shakespeare experience in a van is really
Yeah.
mind-boggling. So, yeah.
Yeah. But that kind of smaller scale, very one-on-one kind of, or there's another piece, I forgot what it's called, but I think it's done in a bathtub. Like this woman comes and does this performance in a bathtub in a bathroom, and it only holds like 8 people, but it's a very like, small scale thing, but I think also really compelling. Well, it's been so great talking to you. I feel like I could talk to you for many, many more hours, but we'll save that for a future conversation. And again, thank you so much for coming on the show. I decided like I wanted you to be one of the first people in the new season. Unfortunately, you got preempted by Star Wars Galactic Cruiser, but you should be, that's probably the only thing that would have, because they just opened in March. And I'm like, oh, we gotta, pander to the masses. So, but I'm super excited to have you on the show. And I really wanna keep up with what you're doing, because I think it's so exciting. All right, well, thanks everyone. So Beyond Screens is back. We're every Wednesday, but at slightly different times each week because of our different time zone requirements. So just go ahead and check the Indicate website for the times. Next week, we're going to be having the return of Alt Control with Alistair Aitchison and Tatiana De Santos, which is a fantastic show. I highly recommend it. I watch it every week, every month, because it's so good. And and I also wanted to remind everyone, we have a special slide for this. Roll slide. Okay, cool. There's a little lag on my second screen here. Yeah, I want to remind everyone that starting on the 22nd, which is 2 days from now, we're going to be doing, I think, our 4th or 5th annual Climate Jam. This is a special Indicate thing that we've been doing every year for Earth Day, in collaboration with the Seattle Indies and Games for Our Future out of Seattle. It is an amazing event. I highly recommend people getting involved in it. And actually, you can do LARPs or digital games. If you wanted to join the Climate Jam and do something around climate that's not digital, that's also great. But it's really cool because we have environmental scientists come and talk about the science. We have various other kinds of experts discussing climate change and then encouraging people. And this year the theme is empathy, and equilibrium. So hope to see you there, and also to see you next week at our next episode of Beyond Screens. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thanks.